na 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 ha na 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 ha na 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 na. Hey, shalom, shalom, wonderful friends. It is great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today. It is terrific to have this opportunity to learn with you today on our 10 Torah lessons on leadership. Today is one of the most famous ones that we're going to talk about. We've already kind of mentioned it a few times, and many of us are very well oriented with this idea in Pirkei Avot. And let's start with a poll question to get our thinking started. Okay, on responsibility. Number one, I feel the weight of the world is on my shoulders. Number two, I really don't feel so obligated to fix this broken world. Number three, I want to do my part, but I can only do so much. Option one, I feel the weight of the world is on my shoulders. Option two, I really don't feel so obligated to fix this broken world. Option three, I want to do my part, but I can only do so much. Which of those best resonates for you? 25% say I feel the weight of the world is on my shoulders. 13% say I really don't feel so obligated to fix this broken world. And 63% say I want to do my part, but I can only do so much. Okay, friends, in Pirkei Avot 2:16, it famously says, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor v'lo ata ben chorin libatel memena. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. You may remember that we've already discussed this statement briefly in our session on the leader's need to push their communities, but not push them too hard. But it's such an important idea that I want to spend a whole session today on what it means for our own personal work as leaders. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. In some ways, it seems Rabbi Tarfon is issuing two warnings about polar opposite concerns, that people might feel the need to do everything and that people might not feel the need to do anything at all. But in another sense, the two halves of Rabbi Tarfon's statement could be two aspects of the same danger, a danger that feels vital right now. With an awareness of all the problems in the world, our sense of responsibility to make things better can be overwhelming, especially in our leadership roles. This can fill us with anxiety and maybe even guilt, as well as engendering an unhealthy balance. Rabbi Tarfon reassures us that it is not our duty to finish the work. Also, though, the sense of overwhelming responsibility can lead to despair, to cynicism. I can't possibly fix this broken mess, so why try? We may, God forbid, give up. And to that, Rabbi Tarfon reminds us that we are responsible, regardless of the overwhelming scope of the problems, to engage with them actively. Rabbi Tarfon's message is important for all of us, but it is especially important for those of us who take on leadership responsibility. I want to talk about three reasons why we are not at liberty to desist from the work, even as we know the work cannot be completed. The first reason is our moral duty. There is a deontological approach to ethical decision-making. In the words of the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, deontology holds that certain actions can be right, even though not maximizing of good consequences. For the rightness of such actions consists in their instantiating certain norms. It doesn't matter if the positive goals of our actions will come to fruition or not. We simply have to act right, according to moral norms and values, because it is right. I'm going to recycle in my recycling bin, even if I feel like it's a ridiculously small drop in the bucket about climate change and the crisis. Neglecting the work is a transgression of a moral value, because there is no such thing as neutrality in a world of systemic injustice. In the Palestinian Talmud, also known as the Jerusalem Talmud, the sages teach any generation in which the temple is not built during its days, it is as though they destroyed it. Neglecting to build is just as bad as demolishing. As 19th century political theorist John Stuart Mill said, let not anyone pacify his conscience by the delusion that he can do no harm if he takes no part and forms no opinion. Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing. He is not a good man who, without a protest, allows wrong to be committed in his name and with the means with which he helps to supply, because he will not trouble himself to use his mind on the subject. And on the particular societal evil of racism, contemporary scholar and activist Ibram X. Kendi has made this point by advocating for the elimination of the notion of not racist as a self-definition. He says that it signifies neutrality, but there is no neutrality in the racism struggle. The opposite of racist isn't not racist, it is anti-racist. So if we desist from the work, not only are we not making things better, but we are actively complicit in the evil we are not engaging with. Rabbi Tarfon forbids us that passivity, which is actually an active siding with an unjust status quo. 3 reasons why we are not at liberty to desist from the work, right? First one, as I said, was the deontological argument based upon duty. The second reason we must stay involved in problems that are too big for us to solve is because of what it does to our own character. Even if we can't change the situation, it can change us. Challenging cruelty can improve us, and ignoring cruelty can make us cruel. A famous psychology experiment by Stanley Milgram proposed to test subjects' willingness to inflict pain on other people when told to do so by experimenters. However, fellow psychologist and researcher Diana Baumrind criticized Milgram's study, pointing out issues with both the reliability of the results and the ethics of the procedure. She questioned in particular what lasting impacts the subjects would incur through their experience of causing pain to another person. Baumrind writes, I would expect a naive, sensitive subject to remain deeply hurt and anxious for some time, and a sophisticated, cynical subject to become even more alienated and distrustful. Later, another researcher, Ian Nicholson, followed Baumrind's cue and turned Milgram's study around to ask why Milgram and his team, let me start this idea over. Ian Nicholson, who follows Baumrind's cue, and turned Milgram's study around to ask about Milgram and his team, how they must have justified to themselves the psychological harm they inflicted on the real subjects of their study, calling his paper The Normalization of Torment. Baumrind and Nicholson remind us that by being a party to violence, injustice, evil, however it may be justified, our own psychological selves will be harmed in the process. That's argument number 2. Argument number 1 was it's our duty. Argument number 2 is that our character will be affected by not engaging in the wrongs of our time. The third reason I want to suggest why we're not at liberty to desist from the work is because we do not know what will change the world. This is a statement of true humility rather than self-deprecation. Self-deprecation says, I can't change things. Humility says, I do not know how the universe functions well enough to know if I can change things or not, so I will try. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar teaches in the name of Rabbi Meir in the 2nd century in the land of Israel in this Tosefta, right? So again, a Tosefta is the same era of the Talmud, but not included in the Talmud. Tosefta comes from the word extra. So it's extra Talmudic teachings that are not included in the Talmud, so Tosefta. Person should always see themselves as if they are half innocent and half guilty, and the world as if it is half innocent and half guilty. If the person does one mitzvah, good for them, for they have tipped their scales and the scales of the world to the side of innocence. If they do one transgression, woe to them, for they have tipped their scale and the scale of the world to the side of guilt. About this it is said, one sinner can destroy much good with a single sin. This one destroyed for him themselves and for the world many good things. So this idea that I don't know if my next action will destroy the world or redeem the world is most commonly attributed to Rambam, Maimonides. But it really originates here in the Talmud of Kiddushin and in this Tosefta. We don't know what difference our action will make. So the sages teach us to assume at all times that the decision you're making at this moment has the potential to redeem the entire world. Do not dare to imagine that we are powerless. I can tell a personal story that a friend shared with me from a time in her life when she was very close to committing suicide, Rahmana litzlan. In that moment, when she was actively planning this horrible act, a stranger in front of her in line at Starbucks paid for her drink. This simple good deed moved my friend to tears and led her to reverse her course. That stranger, even now, after the fact, does not know what an effect their small action had and how they saved a whole world in my friend's life. We do not know what impact we can have, so we must try. We have just discussed 3 reasons why we must continue the work when we know it is too great for us to complete. Number 1, it is a principle, it is a duty to just do what is right. Number 2, it can impact you even if it doesn't impact the world. We will become kinder and less cruel by doing these types of things. And number 3, you don't know. Maybe you actually can have an impact on the world you never could have imagined. Now let's talk about the how. How can we possibly stand up to our responsibility to engage in the work for all of the thousands of pressing issues around us? How can we possibly avoid being complicit bystanders to evil? Perhaps this is aspirational. Perhaps this is paradoxical. But what I want to tell us is we can't do it all, but we can, but we kind of have to anyways. We can't do it all, but we kind of have to. You're not at liberty to neglect it. Applies to every systemic failure in our lives, our communities, our world. We have to be connected to it all in some unrealistic way. On one hand, we need to figure the issue that inspires us, that we care about, that we dreamed about, that we feel empowered by, and focus on it. But we also need to extend ourselves, even if minimally, beyond our core interest, at least to support others who are leading on other points. In some ways, this is a lesson about balancing universalism and particularism and keeping in mind the different layers of our world. You have responsibilities to yourself, to your family, to your community, to your nation, to the world. And it can happen that some people as leaders decide that one or another of those realms is their sole focus. And in order to achieve what they want to achieve at one of those levels, they have a right to neglect the others and thus cause harm. This is a dangerous trap of thinking to fall into. Think of people who love their own nation so much that they feel it's right and necessary to attack people who are different from them. It's admirable to love your own people and care about your culture, but not at the expense of others. Or think of people who have such a strong mission to save the world that they feel justified in interpersonal abuses or familial neglect, as long as it is for the greater mission. Negative examples are so easy to think of in this regard. We must instead find some way to be moral both globally and locally. It may help to remember that your role and approach don't have to be the same for every issue we engage with. We are ourselves, each of us, entire worlds, and on some issues our approach can be more practical, while for others it can be more poetic, and on some for some more spiritual, and for some more strategic. On some issues we can work independently, on others as supporters, on some more collaboratively, and on others in leadership. We can offer our financial resources, our physical strength, our mental creativity, our time, our voices. When it feels like too much, like you have too many different responsibilities, remember that you have many different capabilities to match the many different challenges. Our tradition teaches that the 613 mitzvot incumbent upon us correspond to 613 total organs and sinews in our bodies. Our many capabilities are equal to our many responsibilities. In another version of that teaching, the number of positive commandments, 248, is equal to the number of organs in our body, and the number of negative mitzvot, 365, is the number of days in a solar year. So we have both exactly the right amount of time and exactly the right amount of different strengths to achieve what we need to achieve. There's one more lesson I would like to share about how we can live up to the many calls of responsibility. And it also comes from Rabbi Tarfon, the sage who told us, it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. When other sages wanted to praise Rabbi Tarfon, they said, Rabbi Tarfon is a pile of nuts. What? Pile of nuts? What kind of praise is that? What does that even mean? In one source, this bizarre approbation remains without explanation. But elsewhere, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi explains, with a pile of nuts, when you take one nut out, all the other nuts fall down in a big clatter. That was what it was like whenever a student came to ask Rabbi Tarfon a question. All of a sudden, verses and mishnayot, midrashim and halachot and agadot would all come clattering out of Rabbi Tarfon, and the student would leave his presence full of blessing and good. Rabbi Tarfon was a pile of nuts, and he experienced his learning as a pile of nuts. Everything is dependent on everything else. He could not answer one question about one thing without all the rest of his learning being drawn out and offered up, clattering down with excitement. When we see the world this way, that all the many issues pressing on us are connected, then our awareness can go out in all directions while we work on particular goals. All the nuts rely on all the other nuts, so we can and must stay engaged universally while still focusing on where and how we can best serve. Friends, I want to give two final points. We can go off the slides, and if I can share my screen, I want to share two final points here before we move on. The first one is, does anyone recall the other most famous teaching of Rabbi Tarfon? You will know it when I find it, but I'm going to give you a chance to share if you remember. Okay.
Isn't that who is rich? The person who is content?
Okay, that is a very good point. That is Ben Zoma. Ben Zoma is Pirkei Avot 4:1, but also a super relevant and important teaching here. So the one that I'm going to remind us of, that you have probably seen and will remember, here it is. Can you see that? Okay. What's more important, learning or action? Rabbi Tarfon and some elders were reclining in an upper chamber in the house of Nitza in Lod when this question came up. Now, as a reminder, is very interesting because the Romans are going to destroy Jerusalem. And yet these rabbis of that time period are up in the attic debating philosophy. What's greater, study or action? Rabbi Tarfon spoke up and said, action is greater. Jews were people of action. Rabbi Akiva spoke up and said, study is greater. Jews were people of the book, people of the mind. Then the others come and speak up and say, study is greater because it leads to action. So very interesting. So the conclusion really is saying action is more important, right? You might say, because study is only greater in that it's instrumentally leading us to moral action. But Rabbi Tarfon, the one here who's saying that it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to neglect it, is the one over here in the Talmud who famously says that action is greater than study. So it's interesting to connect that Rabbi Tarfon is really deeply committed to this notion that we are people of action, people of mitzvot, rather than a people of the book. And yet he limits it. And maybe part of what he limits it, you are not free to neglect it. Maybe, it's not your duty to finish it. Maybe partially what he's saying is we also have a responsibility to our mind and soul, where it's not just that, hey, I can't complete the work. It's also that, hey, I also want to study and learn and pray and meditate and listen to podcasts and watch TV. I want to be a part of learning, not just acting. Right? It's not just that I can't finish it. It's that there's another aspect of my life of my mind and soul, in addition to the life of my hands. So I think that's interesting. Now, the last thing I want to say before I go to our conversation is just that I think, especially in the good company of the great people I have, I'm in the company of today, I think this text is often abused is too strong of a word, misused in our circles. I think more commonly that you have this text challenge us to do more, this text is given as a justification for doing less. People say, oh, don't worry, you're being too hard on yourself, right? As Rabbi Tarfon said, it's not all on you, right? Now, I think that's fair if we know people who really, really beat themselves up, who really, really max out their energies. But I know far more people who are like, you know what? 3 years ago, I donated $5,000 to a good cause, right? I did my part. 4 years ago, I voted for the right president. I did my part. You know what I mean? Now, it's good to feel good about that stuff. But I think more commonly, this type of text is basically used to say, you know what? You did something symbolically good. You gave some tzedakah a year ago. You voted 2 years ago. Yasher koach. And now it's other people's turn, right? And so I hope this text, for those who need comfort from feeling it's all on them, can give it that. And for those who really feel overly comforted and overly like they've done their part, can say, actually, there's a lot more neglecting that might be going on in our part. And here I'm speaking to myself because I'm in the camp of someone who doesn't do enough and may feel like, oh, maybe I did enough already. So I should feel the challenge of Rabbi Tarfon rather than the comfort of Rabbi Tarfon. Okay, Matthew, we're over to you.
I clearly do not do enough, but I wanted to go back to your story about the woman who was thinking about suicide. And there's an excerpt I look at all the time from Leonard Felder's book, 7 Prayers That Can Change Your Life. And the extract is, sometimes when I'm having a hard day, some person, often a stranger, does something kind or considerate and begins to turn my day around. These are the moments when I feel God's presence working through the heartfelt actions of human beings. And my particular addition to it is, and Hashem, let me be the stranger every day who tries to do something kind or considerate for someone, but not for me. So I think that's a very interesting. And when I say my morning prayer, which I now do for the first time in my life, but that's a whole other story, the modality, I have some additional things I read. That's one of them, and it goes to that issue that we don't know the consequences of both an action and an inaction.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Matthew. I think that what you've just described, which fits in so well here, is the spirituality of kindness. The spirituality of kindness is such that it fills us with wonder because we do not know what an act of kindness does to the cosmos, does to another person's soul, does to society. And the spirituality of kindness gives us the humility to say, I can't choose not to do this kindness because the opportunity is too great. The full of wonder is too great. And so if I can do this just a few times today, my gosh, that's not easy to do, to find a few new acts of kindness each day, a few good things to do that I didn't plan to do, right? That actually is such a radically subversive act in a society of obsessed with consumerism. Obsessed with consumerism, where we're just buying and buying and buying and don't even see anybody around us anymore because we're so busy buying, right? That this radical amazement of wonderful kindness. Thank you so much, Matthew. Yes, Toby, and then Aglaia.
Well, in 2021, I had a surgery that went very wrong, and I was very, very sick. I almost died. And during that time period, I became aware of a Jewish ethical practice called Musar. What I learned in Musar, one of the things, well, first of all, I became consumed with Musar. I got to be certified as a facilitator from the Musar Institute and all that. Anyway, I'm designing a class for my shul. But bottom line is, what I learned in Musar that was so revolutionary to me, what was much like we just heard, that they give you tasks. It's not just about study. Musar is not just about study and about intellectual activity. You have stuff you got to do every day. You have a phrase that you repeat, and as stupid as it sounds, it's very effective in reminding you of what you should be doing for the particular character trait that you're working on. You have journaling exercises that you are supposed to do. And most important of all, you have these things called kabbalot, which means you got to get up off your butt and go out and do stuff. Like talk to 5 people that you would never say, people that you would never say hello to or never interact with. You have to initiate a conversation with them. I mean, goofy things that you think are so totally like, why am I doing this? But what I discovered and what was so astounding, very, very slowly, I could see my behavior changing. But the more important point is what you're saying about how it affects these other people. You never can know how you're affecting other people, but you can see the smiles on their faces, and you get a feeling that maybe you have made their day a little bit better. Anyway, I can't say enough about Musar, but you don't want to hear from me all day, so I'm done.
Okay, Toby, awesome, thank you. Yes, I had the privilege this year of giving the Tisha B'Av address at the Musar Institute's session just 2 weeks ago, and appreciate their work and just love the Musar movement in general. And I think it's also really great for people who have an orientation towards excitement for growth. Some people get excited by stocks. Some people get excited by running faster. Right? There is all types of growth orientation that excite people. And if people can challenge that excitement of growth towards the Musar approach of character traits as well, I think that's such a great opportunity. Some people might feel like, oh, growth was in my 30s or growth was in my 20s. I'm done with growth, right? That's okay too, right? But for those excited by growth, it's so fun to think about, how am I going to grow in my chesed today, my kindness today? And then actually track it and work on it. It's so awesome. So thank you for that. And I had this really rich conversation on Shabbat with my children around lo tachmod. That because this last parsha has the 10 commandments, and the 10th of them is deemed by the rabbis the most important. Not to covet. Not to covet. What's the big deal, right? But they say all of the other problems and prohibitions emerge from comparison, from jealousy. That stealing happens because you don't feel you have enough, right? And murder, and idolatry. Oh, you want another god, or adultery. You want someone else's, right? All these things emerge from comparison. And so too here as well. Sometimes people feel that they don't do enough because they're comparing themselves to others. Or maybe I did do enough, right? Because I'm comparing myself to others, right? And how do we just get out of this comparison? Like, it has nothing to do with what my neighbor is doing, that they're doing more, they're doing less, right? Just to be in our own Musar tracking of, who do I want to be? Who cares what my neighbor's doing? Who do I want to be in the world? And how do I not let comparison of others affect my own trajectory for where I'm headed in the world. And I think that this is one of the main things that holds us back, is that we are socialized towards norms, as opposed to setting our own goals of what we want to achieve. Thank you, Toby. Thank you so much. Aglaia. Hi, Aglaia. And then I've got something in the chat I'll read after you.
Okay. Hi. Okay. So anyway, though, what I'm thinking of right now, like Psalm 92 about how great are your works, O Lord, how very subtle your designs. The reason why I'm thinking about that in context of all of this is we're talking about, well, one small decision you make and all of that other stuff. But the short version of this story was that a few years ago, I wanted to have do a project in which I, just say, okay, I'm going to start this listening tour, or whatever, just so that younger people in Louisiana, no matter what their political affiliations, they can just have someone listen to them and work on building empathy, that kind of stuff between the political issues and everything else like that. Now, I got a lot of pushback from the people who were supposed to be helping with me with this. Most of them were older than me, and they were just saying, no, we need to actually have a panel and tell them what to do, tell the younger people what to do and everything. And I was like, no, I don't think that that's going to work. So I kind of got a little bit attitude and insisted that I wanted to do my program my way. Well, we ended up having a student come, and I found out later on, because at first people were saying, oh no, it didn't work, nothing happened, none of the students showed up and everything else like that though. But I found out later on the student who did show up actually did meet some people at that event. And when she met people at that event, she ended up leading, one thing led to another, and she ended up applying for an internship. And she got the internship, and what was it? It was to do her own kind of listening tour across Louisiana to students across the political spectrum and stuff like that. So in my case, though, one thing that I just wanted to throw out there, I had no idea that all of this was going on, but apparently, though, there was subtlety in the design that I had no idea, no way of predicting. But another thing, though, was that, well, you don't complete the work because there's work for younger people to take over. They have to have something to do for themselves. And sometimes, it was just for me, I kind of just said, okay, in this case, I could basically let my ego get in the way and say, oh my gosh, I didn't get my listening tour because they wanted someone, who was 19 and cuter than me and all of that other stuff. However, though, for me, I was kind of well, actually, that's pretty cool because maybe they want to, the listening tour to be run by someone who is 19. Maybe someone 19 needs to be the one who's actually running the thing. So I don't know, but the way that I kind of looked at it was, okay, if I hadn't said I'm going to do my program my way, then would the student have actually gone to meet one person and then find out about this internship? And then she got the internship because someone else happened to have turned it down, stuff like that. So just throwing that out there.
Great, Aglaia. Thank you for sharing that powerful example. I appreciate that so much. One of the many things I'm thinking from there is another manifestation of this teaching from Pirkei Avot, which is as educators or as parents or grandparents or the like, or as an employer, right? We do our part, and then the idea is that we then pass it on, right? There's a limit for what we can then do. We can't just step on our child's toes and when they're adults and tell them, what to do, or our student. But actually, there's a mandate to then step back. Point we're going to get to next time. As Judy writes over there, listening as a predicate to action as well. Yes, that is such an important point. This ability to step back and to listen. So thank you for that. And I invite others to engage with that. Just before I go to Matthew's hand that's up, Steve wrote in the chat that he thinks action is more important than learning. For without action, we might not have the freedom to learn. I think this is a really interesting point. I hope his mic's not working right now, but I hope he'll flesh that out a little more because I think I know what he means by that, but I would love to have a better sense of what that means of not having the freedom to learn. I think it's a really fascinating point. Matthew, back to you.
I was thinking during what Alea spoke about what you wrote when President Biden chose to not run, about how people of all ages and where they are I thought it was something you wrote, I saw on Facebook, have to look at themselves and pass the torch. But yet at the same time, this says you cannot stop working. There's a fine line between giving up and letting the next generation do something, and not, oh, I am so wise and old, I've done it, you have to listen to me. And there's this, Pirkei Avot says you don't have to complete it, but at some point you have to let others take the heavier burden, is the way I interpret it.
Right. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Beautiful. Yes. Hi, Gary.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. You just made I think, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if it was you, Shmuly, or what Steve had to say about without action, you have no, without action, you really aren't allowed to learn, which brought me to a question that I've pondered for a long time. So if you're an atheist, for example, where do you pick up your learning to make it a better world? Where's your moral guidance? Where's your moral compass or guidance? Where do you learn about what is good and what is bad? And in Judaism, where at least some of the learning becomes your moral compass or direction to make it a better world. In other words, does that makes what I'm trying to say is, for example, so we know we're Jews and we're learning about Judaism, and we learn about these things that we are asked to do or required to do as being part of the Jewish people. If you're an atheist, for example, how do you just and what becomes your moral compass? So if somebody's drowning, and the atheist says, well, I don't know this person. I don't know anything about him. Why should I jump in the river to try to save him and jeopardize my life? And turns around and walks away, where maybe a religious person, be it Jewish, Christian, or otherwise, that says, listen, I have this religious foundation that says I have a moral obligation to jump into the river to try to save him. I may lose my life, but that's my obligation to do it.
Yeah, Gary, thank you for sharing that. There's quite a bit to say there, and I really appreciate that. Firstly, yes, it is true that in the name of a belief in a God, many people have been able to sacrifice enormously. Those who believe have a faith, and those who believe there is a next world have done extraordinary things based upon that faith. I believe it's also true that people who have not been people of faith have been capable of doing showing extraordinary sacrifice based on other human faculties they've been able to engage. I sent this teaching from Martin Buber to one of you a week ago, and here's what Buber writes over here. A rabbi was asked by one of his students, why did God create atheists? After a long pause, the rabbi finally responded with a soft but sincere voice. God created atheists, he said, to teach us the most important lesson of them all, the lesson of true compassion. You see, when an atheist performs an act of charity, visits someone who is sick, helps someone in need, and cares for the world, he's not doing so because of a religious teaching. He does not believe that God commanded him to perform this act. In fact, he does not believe in God at all. So his actions are based on his sense of morality. Look at the kindness he bestows on others, simply because he feels it to be right. When someone reaches out to you to pay for help, you should never say, I'll pray that God will help you. Instead, for that moment, you should become an atheist. Imagine there's no God who would help and say, I'll help you. So I thought that was an interesting, rabbinic teaching that Buber brings. And I think that, I encourage us all to think about how our own faith or what we have faith in or trust in helps and hinders our own kind of action model. I know many people who kind of have a faith model that says God will do it all, and that lets them off the hook. I know other people who believe in a covenantal partnership. If you were at the VBM program with Yitz Greenberg, that's very much his theology around the Beit, this partnership. and many other versions. But going back to one point said earlier, there was something that happened for me yesterday that made me think about this issue of how hard it can be to stop the work. And the issue was, and here I can mention the phone call I got because I'm not going to mention their name or anything private about them. But a couple called me who was engaging a surrogate. They're engaging in a process of surrogacy. Not the traditional surrogacy where a mother has a baby and then just basically gives that baby, but the type of surrogacy that most engage with today, where the mother donates her egg, another woman carries that egg, carries the fetus. And I thought about how difficult it would be to be that woman who gives birth to that child, who then gives that child willingly over. And that ability for her to say, I've done my part of carrying that fetus for this woman who's struggling, or couple struggling with infertility. And now you'll do your part. And I thought that was such a powerful image. Tangentially, just because we're on the point, one of the questions the couple had was, who is the halachic mother? And actually, among the rabbis, that is a total debate. According to about half of the rabbis, the mother is the one who gave the egg. Is genetically going to be her baby, right? According to the other half of the rabbis, the mother is the one who gives birth. And there's a whole bunch of kind of interesting implications there for that case and kind of what that means for, a whole bunch of different considerations. In any case, I only bring up that interesting case because it's one of the fascinating medical innovations we have in our day that the rabbis couldn't have imagined. No one could have imagined, just a few decades ago. And that issue of what does it mean to give birth? And then not at 18, send the child out to college. Not at 25, kick the kid out of your basement. Not at 35, really kick him out of your basement, right? But at day one, I'm now sending you off into a life where I'm not going to know you. Right? You come out of my womb, and I pray for your success in the world. In any case, I see Steve wrote a little more. Yes, mother in different ways, Aglaya writes. Steve wrote a little more here because his mic is not working. Are we talking about humanitarian community action or something unique to our profession? I think the desire to help others is innate and shared by peoples of different backgrounds. To me, there are three things which are shared by everyone: the desire to create, desire to connect with others, and the desire to express compassion. And I'm not exactly sure what that has to do with my original comment about action and learning. Okay, that's great. Now, thank you for that. It's very common today to say that people are fundamentally selfish. People are fundamentally greedy. People are blah, 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 blah. But picking up on Steve's point, something interesting that Rabbi David Wolpe said when he spoke at VBM last time at Temple Solel. At this point in my career, I don't remember if that was 6 months ago or 6 years ago. But sometime in the past, we had him, and here's what he said. He said, one of the examples is to demonstrate why people are fundamentally not selfish, is that if you tell people that they are going to die, right, that reality for most people adds more meaning to their life rather than drains meaning from their life. It is meaningful to reflect on mortality because we think about our limited time. We think about what matters in our life. It's meaningful to think I will die. But if we told people that in 25 years after they died, the whole world would cease to exist, there would be no more humanity, the planet Earth would be destroyed, that would destroy the meaning of people's lives. Now, that's very interesting. That's to say that we find more meaning in the idea that humanity will continue than we do in the idea that my life will continue. And I think that is an interesting counter argument to the point that humans are fundamentally selfish. Rather, we are fundamentally connected in our meaning to the idea that humanity will continue. That's a very meaningful idea to us, that we feel we're part of a collective beyond ourselves, future generations. Yes, David Newton.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, my name won't go.
Yeah, please try to find a way to have your name so people who don't know you, I think most of us here know you now.
I usually can do it, but
okay.
Well, I of course always love Mother Teresa. Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. Kind of a similar idea. So from you, Rabbi, I wrote down, find a few good things that I have done today, or someone else has done for me today. You know, when I review my day, I think of everything I'm grateful for. My wonderful cup of coffee, the beautiful rainbow that I saw, you know, all kinds of things that are good, but to add that component of what acts of kindness have I done today? Someone gave the cart at Aldi's and didn't charge a quarter to the person. To challenge myself to do some things that are ethical, because I often, when I'm here, I'm going to diss some of my friends. I don't know, but we talk about what we're grateful for. Okay, the nice cruises we're taking, the great movies we're seeing. All of these things are good, but sometimes I'm left wanting. Where are the ethical actions? And I don't know, just a thought.
Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It is so easy to get excited about our next trip, our next social engagement. And that's wonderful. Those things are beautiful. We should enjoy those. But how can we revive a culture of excitement for doing good? Excitement for being a part of repairing the world. And that's the spiritual revolution I hope we can be a part of together. That we are so animated. People get so animated about politics and about again, that's fine. Politics is important, but getting really animated about the ability to individually do good in the world. That's the part of community I want to be a part of. Now, there's one other type of, since you brought up gratitude, one other type of gratitude I want to bring up. Sometimes we think we need not be grateful for something that someone is just doing their job or fulfilling their role, right? As if the only thing I should be grateful for, is something that somebody goes above their job or beyond their role. But in fact, when somebody bags our groceries, even though they're paid for it, right? We can be grateful for that. When a lawyer does their job, or an accountant or a doctor, yes, who cares if they're paid X, Y, or Z for that? We can be really grateful that they did their job for us. Or we might think of our spouse or our child as, oh, they're obligated to support me because they're my child, or my spouse should do this thing for me, right? But they don't have to do those things, right? And even if we think it's their role to do that, we can be really grateful for people fulfilling their role or fulfilling their duty. Just doing the basic. Sometimes we think I have to go do something extraordinary today, but sometimes just doing the things that are just a part of the life we've committed to, right? That itself is great. And that itself is something to be grateful to others for. And imagine next time you pick up the newspaper on your driveway, if you're like me and still like to have a print newspaper, you pick it up, just hold it for a second, be like, oh, I'm so grateful to the person who dropped this here. Right? The person who dropped this here. Or you get your mail. Take 5 seconds. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. The postal worker gave me their mail. I'm so grateful for them. Right? Right? Or the Amazon delivery person. You go and get your box. And the post say, oh my gosh, how amazing is that these people showed up to my door and dropped the box at my door to get the box, as opposed to I paid $17 for my extension cord. I deserve my extension cord even earlier. Say, oh my gosh, you brought me an extension cord. Who am I to deserve this extension cord? Right? So, yes, Judy Schaffer.
Seems to me that to bring it back to the study versus action thing, what you are saying to us that we should not merely live in radical amazement. We should have radical appreciation.
Yes.
But we don't necessarily know how to do those kind of things without training. So in the home, we get basic training, and we continue to learn throughout our lives so that we can understand what, as adults, we have our priorities to do, because nobody can do everything. And we have to choose the things that we want to do that will have some impact and that will have meaning and that will give us joy. So we have to study and to think to reach the point where we become Steve Chauvin, who already knows what to do.
Great. I'm actually going to, after this, print out a sign for my fridge at home called Radical Appreciation. That everyone in our home should have 5 acts of radical appreciation each day, because they might think, oh, mommy made some noodles. Like, that's mommy's job. She makes noodles. My job is to eat them, but actually, like, I don't care that mommy made noodles for you the last 100 times. Like, you now say thank you to mommy for doing that. Or your brother just, did whatever she did. Now, they point out each other's faults, but how do we live in a world of radical appreciation and the radical amazement that goes with it? Like we're saying, like, oh my, like, none of this has to be the case. It doesn't have to be the case. Like, that, imagine, like, when I pick up my shirt and I look at the label, it says made in Bangladesh. I take a moment and say, oh my gosh, there's a woman in Bangladesh. There's a woman in Bangladesh who, like, sat at a table and worked on this shirt, Can I think of her for a moment? She has no idea I'm thinking of her, but maybe thinking of her, improve something. So yeah, thank you, Judy, for that. I love that. Toby, over to you.
2 things. I don't mean to be a Musar salesman, but I'll tell you
no,
what.
We want Musar salesmen. Yeah.
Musar really taught me to appreciate. Again, one of the tenets of it is to really evaluate what it is you're doing every day, not just walking blindly through your daily drive to work or whatever. The second thing is, like I say, I was sick in 2021, very sick. And of course, that was the pandemic. And bringing it closer to home, those Instacart people, if you're sick and you can't go out to get groceries and you don't have anybody, you don't have a significant other or a kid or a whatever, those people saved my life. I mean, that and the prescription delivery guy from the CVS pharmacy, I don't know. Maybe other people don't think in terms of the fact that maybe other people don't have the restrictions that I have. But I'll tell you what, when you're alone in the world, those Instacart people and those prescription delivery people are golden.
Yeah.
That is literally, to many old, I'm old, okay, I'm old. But many of the older people who suffer from isolation and depression and things like that, where the pandemic only made that worse, these people were freaking lifelines to the universe. So anyway.
Yeah, thank you. And I would add to that, something I'm trying to get better at as well is to see the people, if you're a dog walker, to see the people walking their dogs. Because sometimes some of those people, that's some of the only social interaction they may get in the day is someone they pass when they're walking the dog. And the like. And so, yeah, thank you for that. We never know who is struggling with loneliness. I mean, we know the percentages are skyrocketing of how lonely people are in the world for many reasons. And we should encounter each person that we see as if they're potentially one of those people, that is not to push ourselves upon people, of course, but to engage in a way that, hey, maybe this is a person who needs connection. We'll find out quickly whether they want that or not, right? But maybe this is a person who a little positive connection is going to be significant for them. So thank you for that. And on the topic of Musar, one I was thinking about just the other day was Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement, was very, his student noticed that he encountered a macher. He was talking to a macher, and a significant person, a rich person, whatever you want to say, a powerful person, and the student noticed that he sighed. Oh, and after he talked to the macher, the student said, "Why did you sigh?" And Salanter said, "I realized how embarrassed I was that I had a rip in my shirt when I was talking to the macher, and then I sighed because I realized that's something I should be embarrassed about." Right? What I should be embarrassed about in the world is whether I'm living by my highest virtues, not by my rip in my shirt, and my accountability for that, this and that. And I was thinking about that just the other day in terms of kind of this rewiring of priorities. Rather than walking in the world with shame, how do we walk in the world with gratitude? That is one of the rewirings we can do. Walking with the insecurity, am I enough? Do I have enough? Am I good looking enough? Is my shirt tucked in good enough? Blah, 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 right? Get out of myself and get into the gratitude mode. And that can be a really powerful way to reorient ourselves. Friends, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of how we can lead in the world. It's not a session on kindness, but kindness is at the root of moral leadership. Because actually, part of what we're saying is leadership is not just being a CEO or a senator. Leadership is living with kindness. That doing our part looks very different to many of us. Some of us are in the thick of our career. Some of us are at the end of our career. Some of us are retired. And wherever we are, we each have unique opportunities to do our part and only our part, right? And we should find some challenge and some comfort in this reality that Rabbi Tarfon is offering us, this timeless wisdom, that the world is so beautiful and the world also has so many challenges, and we could be grateful for the beauty and do our part to address the challenges while keeping the gratitude and beauty in our heart and in our mind. Have a wonderful day.